Hello and welcome to Media Canvas, a show in which I consume a piece of media and then review it. This week, a podcast. The author John Green writes and narrates a podcast called The Anthropocene Reviewed. In this podcast, he reviews different parts of the human period of time in which our species exists. It's the Anthropocene. He does all of this on a 5-star scale and has become the normal way to present our opinions on something because all reviews seem to be on a 5-star scale. In June of 2019, I was neck deep in podcasts, taking in more than 40 hours a week. My job has lots of time where I am accomplishing tasks in which I can put a set of headphones in and listen. I listen to podcasts on hobbies I enjoy, of course, but what I found to be the most interesting were the podcasts that I could learn from. Podcasts covering a range from economics, science, language, and much more. I am personally someone who loves to learn new things. Even if I do not always retain the new information, I enjoy it. On one of these podcasts I was listening to was 99% Invisible. The host of that podcast, Roman Mars, had an interview with John Green about his podcast. I found that I was really fascinated by the tone of the reviews shared as parts of that interview. I had heard about John Green as the book Turtles All the Way Down was floating around amongst the type of media I tend to consume. I personally just hadn't followed through, as the time I spend reading nowadays is much more limited than it used to be. In any case, his style of writing outside of this series is honestly an unknown to me. I still have not gone back and looked into the things he has written. And despite that, I bought his book in which he expanded upon the things he covered in the podcast. So, knowing that, I feel safe continuing with the review. John Green has a pretty great radio voice, to be honest. The charisma in the way he talks and presents the essays he is reading turn otherwise boring topics into something interesting and fascinating. The individual ways and the way they are presented give me a few glimpses at what his personality might be like, and I really hope he is the friendly, thoughtful individual I think he is. There are certainly podcast hosts out there that I prefer, but there are also hosts that are horrible to listen to, and John Green is definitely a wonderful host for a podcast. The topics of this individual podcast are wide-ranging. And as someone who likes knowledge, I greatly appreciate this fact. Some topics are covered and shared with bits of research, and others are more of a narrative story in which the reviewed subject plays a prominent role. Either way, there's something to take away from the individual reviews. Things that have been extremely decisive in the last several years, such as Hawaiian pizza, are presented to you, the listener, all culminating with a personal opinion of the value of that thing on a 5-star scale. The audio quality is clean and well done in every episode, as this is something I've come to expect out of any podcast that has a studio actually promoting or distributing it. If I had issues with the sound quality, I most likely would not have stuck around, as despite his charisma and radio voice, John Green is trying to present his reviews in a format of proper literary essays, which is a format that one could find very dry and boring. The different episodes have a wide array of how they make me feel listening. From great enjoyment at one end and a lot of that was neat or interesting, there are also big standout episodes that I remember strongly. My least favorite episode is the one that was released at the end of 2020 on the topic of plague. With COVID existing in our world so strongly now, right in the middle of it all, covering plague was a bold move, and one I truly did not find I cared for. Well, my favorite episode is one that just ticks all the boxes for me as someone who likes to learn things. The Lascaux paintings is extremely informative and entertaining. Sitting back and looking for a piece of media as I moved into the 10th episode was a surprise. I wasn't intending it to be anything other than just another episode. Then I purchased the book John Green released that is basically this podcast, but in text upon a page bound together as a book. While I have not taken the time to read the Anthropocene reviewed essays on a human-centered planet, it reminded me that I was in part inspired to do this podcast by the Anthropocene reviewed. The reviews showed me that given the motivation, I could make a podcast on anything I wanted to. If I could separate that from my opinion on the podcast and review it on all other aspects, it would not feel the same at the end of the day. So I give the podcast, The Anthropocene Reviewed, an extremely solid 4 out of 5. If you would like to follow me on social media and subscribe on YouTube, you can find me at Damekage. Until next time.